Okay then, so today what I'd like to talk about is introduce everyone to classical conditioning and operant conditioning, which is a behaviourist, which is from the school of behaviourism. So firstly, the aims of the class today are for you to be able to understand what classical conditioning is and what operant conditioning is, and also be able to differentiate between the two schools of thought, and then we'll try and apply that to contemporary society and see how it actually affects us today. So, Ivan Pavlov was the giant, if you like, of classical conditioning, and he devised the theory of the experiment of the salivating dog. I don't know if you guys have heard of it before, but I'll briefly explain it. Basically, he was actually a physicist, and he was doing a study on the digestive system of dogs. And what he noticed was every time he would give the dog food, the dog would respond automatically or naturally by salivating. So the food was an unconditioned stimulus, and it would cause an unconditioned response, a natural response. Now when he rang a bell, the dog wouldn't salivate, it was a neutral stimulus. So you refer to the bell as a neutral stimulus because it didn't cause anything, and the dog would be normal. But what he started to do was he'd ring the bell and then provide the food. And after a few times of associating the bell with the food, the dog's instincts and his biology changed, where the dog would hear the bell, and even without being presented with food, the dog would naturally begin to salivate. So what then happened was that stimulus of being neutral was associated with an unconditioned stimulus, which was the food, and it became the bell then became a conditioned stimulus because it conditioned the dog to then salivate to the sound of the bell. So now the bell without the food was a conditioned stimulus, and the dog had a conditioned response, which was then salivating. Can this be applied to humans? Can I just get a volunteer to come up and just write their name on the board? Anyone? Tasni? Oh yeah, Avs, you want to come up? Okay, so.
Just write my name, yeah?
Just write your name.
Capitals normal?
Yeah. Stop!
Okay.
Okay. No, sorry, yeah, go on.
I'm not going to write it.
Yeah, go on, right. Stop! Okay, so that was a bit of a rubbish example.
I was going to scream, right?
Yeah. No, you're just supposed to get conditioned to feel. So
right.
what I was trying to do then was get Abs to then become more reluctant because he doesn't want the negative association with, wait a minute, if I do touch the pen on the board, he's going to make some horrible noise. Take that a bit further, this is John Watson, and what he did was he actually applied that theory that Pavlov introduced to human beings. So he used a 9-month-old baby from a hospital and put him in the laboratory, and he conducted some preliminary battery baseline tests where he subjected the little baby to a white rat, a white rabbit, burning newspaper, masks with and without hair, a number of things. He introduced them to the, it was unethical at the time, but it was in the 1900s. It was actually done in 1920. And what he did was he introduced these items or these stimuluses to the child for the first time in his life and for a brief time. And all of those stimuluses were neutral. And then what he did was he took the white rat, he put the baby in the middle of the room on a mattress, and he let the white rat in the room as well, and the baby would go in, approach the white rat and play with it. So that white rat was then a neutral stimulus because it didn't make the baby cry, didn't induce any fear, it didn't have any reaction, the baby was just happy playing with it. What Watson did then, and I've done a little example here using my lovely nephew, is the white rat was a neutral stimulus which caused the baby to not react, he was just happy. But when the baby heard a loud noise, a hammer being struck against an iron rod, and it would induce fear in the baby, and the baby would start crying. So then what he did was put those two stimuluses together, see if he could change the neutral stimulus into a conditioned one. So he would let the baby play with the rat, but the minute the baby would touch the rat, he would then strike an iron rod behind the baby's back. The baby would then become frightened, and the baby would start to cry. What he did that continuously over a period of time, and eventually the baby every time it saw the rat, it would move away, start crying, and it was then conditioned to hating the rat. It was afraid of the rat. It actually went as far as to when the baby saw anything remotely associated with the rat. So if you saw a man with a white beard, if you saw a fur coat, he would then associate, he was so conditioned to fearing the rat that he would associate that like similarities with the rat, and he would start to cry, little baby Albert. So that is a demonstration of classical conditioning occurring in human beings. I'm sure we can all think of classical conditioning that has occurred with us. Does anyone want to share a very brief example? You don't have to, I'll give you one. When I was a kid, I never feared spiders, and my mum went, no! And from then, I'm very scared of spiders, so I think that's a classical conditioning taking place there. What we're going to talk about now, so just to an overview then of classical conditioning. If you just want to note this down, classical conditioning mainly is one stimulus which is neutral, associated with a stimulus that is an unconditioned stimulus, so it causes a natural response. Pair them two together enough, and eventually what you have is the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus because you react in the way that you would do with an unconditioned stimulus, if that's not too much stimulus and conditioning talk here. Alright, so is everyone clear on that so far? Yeah? Fantastic. Okay, so now what we're going to talk about is operant conditioning, and we're going to talk about Thorndike's puzzle box. What Thorndike did, now operant conditioning mainly consists of positive reinforcement, positive stimuluses, and it modifies behaviour. So it doesn't modify your biology or reaction where you naturally see a white rat and you start to cry. Or another example would be being electrocuted from changing a plug. You get electrocuted enough, you're afraid of changing plugs, you start to break out in a sweat. It's a biological, almost like a natural reaction. But Thorndike's theory of operant conditioning is more about modifying one's behaviour to suit a certain consequence. So you, mainly it's positive reinforcement that operant conditioning occurs in. What he did was he put a cat in a box and he put food outside the box. Cruel, but yeah. And then the cat was in the box for a very long time doing its own thing, but it then touched a string that was hanging off the box, and when it hit the string, the trap door opened and the cat was then able to obtain the food. Eventually, after numerous tests, as you can see at the bottom it's illustrated, the cat's behaviour modified. It learnt that if I pull the string, I will be able to get out of the box and eat some food. So it's positive reinforcement. You pull the string and your positive reinforcement would be you can't get out and eat some food. So can this be applied to humans? What I'm going to do now is escape part of this briefly, and I'm going to show you a little video clip of operant conditioning. So if you guys want to take notes, it's a very brief video, so you probably won't have to, but you can see operant conditioning in quite a comical way.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh. Hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who got to a place of work.
Okay. I know what you're doing. Really?
Yes! You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
Sheldon, you can't train my girlfriend like a lab rat.
Actually, it turns out I can.
Well, you shouldn't.
There's just no pleasing you, is there, Leonard? You weren't happy with my previous approach to dealing with her, so I decided to employ operant conditioning techniques, building on the works of Thorndike and V.M. Skinner. Yet by this time next week, I believe I can have her jumping out of a pool, balancing a beach ball on her nose.
Okay, so if anyone would like to enlighten me. The way it was, the operant conditioning taking place? What was he doing to modify her behaviour, what he deemed as correct behaviour? What stimulus? Go on, Nadia.
Reward
Yeah,
using
well,
chocolate.
Chocolate, yeah. So the chocolate was used as positive reinforcement for behaviour that he deemed as correct behaviour. What I want you guys to do is just take a minute to think of how, when you as a child perhaps, or even as teachers, how we might use operant conditioning and to positively reinforce certain behaviour. And then whenever one of you is ready, just put your hands up. I do have a time limit, so if you want to get it out of there, go on, Mark.
I think mine was when I'd done well at school, I'd like to take them to like Woolworths or something, and like brought like a He-Man or, you know, like a Captain Planet kind of figure. So I always associated achieving.
Brilliant. So, and that is a classic example where my mum was saying, if you get to uni and pass your A levels, you'll get a car. So I was like, oh, great. So that was positive reinforcement. And that's a classic example of how parents would use positive reinforcement to modify your behaviour. So yeah, that's a very good example. I'm glad you've understood that, otherwise we're going to get in trouble. Okay, so, let's see. For the next part, what I'd like to do is a little game, a little test, so just to see how much you guys have learned and if you can actually differentiate between classical and operant conditioning. So I'm going to divide the room here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, we'll have Tasneem, you can go on this side as well. So this can be Team Alpha, this team can be Amiga. And what I want to do is I'll ask you a question, and we're paying for points here, so I want this to be competitive. So Alpha, Team Alpha, and then Amiga. I want you guys to start chanting and drumming your chest and all that as well, so get on it. Right, I'm going to ask you a question. So you're not going to know when I finish, so I'll do that, and then when I'm finished, I'll put my head up as a cue to I'll finish the question. Listen to the wording of the question, because that's important. When you think you know the answer, shout your team's name. So you'll be Amiga, you're Alpha, and if the question is correct, then you get a point. But then I'm going to ask you to elaborate on it. So what was the stimulus, how was it operant conditioning, that kind of stuff. And if you can elaborate effectively, and I deem it and I'm happy with your elaboration, then great. If not, then it forfeits the next team, then you've got the opportunity to get a point as well. If you get both the questions right, you get 2 points, yeah? Okay, so, first question. Every time someone flushes a toilet in the apartment building, the shower becomes very hot and causes a person to jump back. Over time, the person begins to jump back automatically after hearing the flush, before the water temperature changes. What is this example? Alpha, yeah, go on then.
Classical conditioning.
Okay, it's classical conditioning. And why do you say that?
Because it just used to be a stimulus before, and it's become conditioned to feel that the flush is associated with pain.
Fantastic, that's absolutely right. So what Tasneem's done is demonstrate she's very effectively learnt that. The hot water is an unconditioned stimulus where you automatically, your brain will jump back because it's going to scorch you otherwise. And the jumping back is an unconditioned response. When you hear a flush of the toilet, you're not going to jump back. You're quite comfortable if you're sitting on the toilet and you flush it, and you know. So, but over time, unfortunately, this person, because of associating the hot water with the sound of the toilet flushing, it then became a conditioned response, and the toilet flush was a conditioned stimulus. Okay, so that's 2 points for Team Alpha. Okay, and then question 2. Your father gives you a credit card at the end of the year in your first year of college because you did so well. As a result, your grades continue to get better in the second year.
Amiga.
Amiga, yeah, so...
It's operant conditioning.
Okay, and why do you say that?
Because the credit card is used as a reward, that positive reinforcement for doing well.
Fantastic, so that's absolutely right again. The credit card has, I guess, in a way modified the student's behaviour where, like you said, positive reward. So, that's 2 points for Amiga. Okay, so question 3. Your car has a red flashing light that blinks annoyingly if you start the car without having your seatbelt buckled. You become less likely to start the car without buckling the seatbelt. What is this?
Alpha.
Alpha, go on.
Classical conditioning.
Classical conditioning, okay, and why do you say that?
Well, because We've just realised that if you're not gonna put your belt on, then you're gonna have the light and it's gonna start irritating you. So straight away when you get into the car, the first thing you're gonna do is wear your seatbelt.
Okay. I can see where you're coming from, but unfortunately that's not correct. So that's going to be forfeited to illegal. Liz, would you like to?
Oh no, it was in my head and the answer then. The light is acting as a reinforcer. And you've got the positive reinforcement because the light's off. So you get in your car, you put your seatbelt on, so you don't have the annoying flashing lights.
Absolutely. So what it is, it's not only positive reinforcement, it's actually positive punishment, if you like. That's an actual term used in operant conditioning, where you're modifying. I don't wear my seatbelt, but because of that bloody sound, I've modified my behaviour to every time getting into my car and putting the seatbelt on, because I'm conditioned to putting my seatbelt on now, simply because it's a better consequence for me than having to hear that annoying sound. So that's a point each. Yeah, would you like to elaborate, anyone? Yeah, okay, that's fine. So, question 4.
Excuse me, why is that a point each? Because you said it was
I got it wrong.
Yeah, so, no, she...
She?
I got it wrong.
Taz said, you said no Taz, that's not right, so it gets forfeited to the other team. The other team said, haha, we know the answer, and gave the answer, which is accepted.
That was a test! And you passed it. Alright, so... Oh, I don't know why that happened. Okay, so you eat new food and then get sick because of the flu. So it's not the food that made you sick, it's the food. But because it was new food that you never tried before, you develop a dislike for that food and you feel nauseated every time you smell it. What is this?
I'll let you speak.
Yeah, go on now.
This is it classical conditioning?
It is.
Because although it wasn't the food that made you poorly, you just associate that food with being poorly, so you just automatically don't eat it because you don't want to get poorly again.
Absolutely.
And you feel negative.
That's really good. So the flu was the unconditioned stimulus, and then the nausea was the unconditioned response. But because your brain associated, like you said, the food with the flu, and the nausea then became conditioned because of the food. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's 2 points for Alpha. So they've drawn level, and this is the tiebreaker. So it's the last question.
Come on.
Okay, so listen carefully. So an individual receives frequent injections of drugs, which are administered in a small examination room at a clinic. The drug itself causes increased heart rate, but after several trips to the clinic, simply being in a small room causes an increase in heart rate.
Omega.
Go on, Nadia.
Is it classical conditioning?
Okay, and why do you say that?
Because having the injection causes the heart rate to increase, but then because of the environment, they then start to associate it with being in that environment.
You've understood that very well, and I'm very happy with this outcome. Yeah, so that's
Give us the
Alpha.
Amiga.
So, Amiga then. Nadia and Liz, your backs must be sore because you carry it to you. No one else is But anyway, so yeah, like you said, so the drug was an unconditioned stimulus, which the unconditioned response was the heart rate increasing, but not the small room. The small room, that was a neutral stimulus. That didn't do anything, but because it was associated with the drug, it then became conditioned. So it's an automatic response in your body that you would then your heart rate would increase. So yeah, you've done very well. What I'd like you guys to do is just when you go home, just think about how operant conditioning and classical conditioning affects your everyday life in teaching, the learning. And we had an example of behaviour management, and when Neil pointed out a student seeks attention, and the way they do this is through being asleep on the table and hoping that a teacher wakes them up. So if you, every time the student is pretending to be asleep, go and wake them up, you're positively reinforcing that behaviour. If you leave it out and just ignore them, eventually they're not getting the consequences that they desire. So that's how you could help apply that in learning and manage your class. Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap this up? So, no questions. Everyone's quite confident then on classical conditional preposition. Fantastic. Okay, so that's 20 minutes. And thank you very much for your attention, everyone. Thanks.
So while we're sorting out the, so you can just all jump back down and then sort out your video. But while we're waiting for that, perhaps we can have some verbal feedback.
Maybe.
I think the quiz at the end was quite good, but there was only one problem with it. Majority of us sitting over here have a degree in psychology and stuff, so the people on this side really didn't have that an advantage. So it might have been better if the classes was, if the group was split a bit more evenly, because no offense or anything, but they might have struggled because they didn't have the prior knowledge that we have.
Yeah.
So that might just be something that you have to think about if we did have like different abilities in the class.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Take that on board. I actually forgot that you guys are all social science.
Come on.
But you did really well, so.
I like the quiz that like the competitive idea around it, because it sort of like gets you going at the end of like the explaining, and then like this didn't make me fall asleep at all, but it like it wakes you up, like, and gets you like,
Yeah.
makes it stick in my mind.
Yeah.
I was actually interested. I was really interested. I found I wanted to know more. I think that it's really, really engaging. And I loved your examples as well. And I think there's a bit of humour in there. It didn't feel very stiff. It felt very nice and relaxed. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate that point. I mean, talking about different abilities of what in the room, I found it actually quite easy to engage and follow along, and the humour brought into it actually made me more interested, more engaged. And I think fair enough, maybe it went one-sided to one extent, but then again it didn't necessarily make anyone not want to answer.
Yeah. Thanks.
Can I just say the timing, because I can see the clock, you stuck to it, so you did it in the time. Well done.
Yes, and that. Busy fields plan to fail. Okay. Alright, thank you very much.